Wake up! Come on! Someone was shaking her by the shoulders, trying to pull her out of the nightmare. Glafira reluctantly opened her eyes and closed them again, the light shining directly into her eyes. Her frightened grandmother and mother were leaning over her. Her mother had come from town the day before to take her daughter home. The pretext, of course, was convincing, only Glasha realized that her mother had simply run away from her mother-in-law. "Daughter! It can't go on like this. You don't sleep well at night, you wake up with nightmares." Mom looked worried. "When we get back to town, we'll go to the doctor. I'm not going anywhere. It's Mashka. She keeps trying to show who her." Glafira stopped talking and looked away. She still couldn't pronounce that terrible word. "Lie down and I'll sit with you," suggested the girl's mother. Glasha dozed off and her mother stroked her hair, immersed in her thoughts. Vera, Glasha's mother, did not want to return to the city. And it was not only her mother-in-law, although she drank a lot of blood from her daughter-in-law. The city strangled Vera, did not allow her to live normally, but for the sake of her daughter she tolerated. But there was another reason that kept her in the city. Now, having returned for a while to her native home, the woman desperately wanted to stay. After all, she was not a city dweller by nature. In the morning, Glasha came to the kitchen, where her mother and grandmother were arguing about something lively, and immediately fell silent as soon as the girl entered. "Baby, how are you?" Vera asked. "I'm fine, Mom, I'm fine. Can't Baba Yella go for herbs again?" "No." "Daughter, you realize that this is a game of subconsciousness and imagination. Yes, Masha was killed by a scoundrel and he will be caught and you must stop thinking about it." Her mother spoke to her sternly. "Do you understand?" "Mom, you are," Glasha started. "Listen to your mother, she wants to do you good. And the murderer will be caught, of course. How was it then? Many years ago?" Grandmother and mother were instantly silent and pale as if all the blood had been drained out of them. Glafira watched her relatives' reactions carefully. "What are you talking about?" Vera asked calmly. She tried not to let her voice shake. "You tell me, Mom," Glasha replied just as calmly. "That's what they told me in my dream. Ask your mother, so I'm asking. What happened many years ago?" The women were silent, hesitating to start a conversation. Glasha's grandmother stood up with a heavy sigh and left the kitchen, while Vera suddenly started fussing, pulling out food as if she were going to cook. Glafira looked at the behavior of her mother and grandmother in bewilderment. To tell the truth, no one said anything to her in the dream, only Mashka warned of trouble. But for some reason the girl was sure her mother and grandmother knew. "Glash, go help your grandmother in the vegetable garden, then go to the hen house and bring eggs," Vera ordered, pretending that her daughter had not asked a question. Glafira silently fulfilled her mother's request, helped her grandmother, then went to the store. Returning from the store, she heard her mother and grandmother talking in raised tones. "She's going to find out! Someone will find out, you know that, Vera," Grandma said loudly. "You'd better tell it like it is, as you remember it. Otherwise they might say something like that, you'd think. I'm afraid." "When I start thinking about it, I get a chill on my skin," replied Vera. "What's Mom talking about?" Glafira asked, appearing behind Vera's back. "Glasha, were you eavesdropping?" The woman was indignant. "Not such a big sin." "Speak, Mother," Glafira asked softly but insistently. "Good, or rather nothing good in this story." Sighing heavily, Vera began the story. Marina, Ira, and Vera were friends from childhood. Their mothers worked together and they lived the same way, not worse than others. Yes, there were no delicacies, but they were clothed and fed. Their village was large, and at that time there was a school, a kindergarten, and even a library. Everyone knew each other. Any incident became public at once. The girls studied well at school and thought about going to the city. Marina dreamed of becoming a veterinarian and then treat animals on the local farm. Ira's dream was to become a medical university. She wanted to become a surgeon and was working hard on her studies. In those days they had few chances to enter at once, but there was a backup option. If you go to technical school, then go to the enterprise and work the prescribed period, the path to the dream became easier. You could enter from the enterprise as a working youth. In general, the girls had thought of everything. It remained to pass the school exams. Vera didn't want to leave her native village and was going to enter the pedagogical university. And now, the last exams were passed with excellent marks. The graduation ceremony was over, and it was time to submit documents to educational institutions. Although the friends entered different educational institutions, they lived together in the same room at their friend's house in the city. The exams were successfully passed. A month of freedom before studying and adulthood was ahead. The girls decided to return to the village before the start of classes. The summer was very hot that year. It hadn't rained for a month and the ground was like stone. They didn't wait for the bus to the village. It went either early in the morning or in the evening, and as usual they overslept. The passing bus left the passengers at the stop on the road, so they had to walk a little way, taking a shortcut. A lot of the villagers did that, and that day 3 people got off with them, 2 women and a man. While the girls walked leisurely chatting, everyone went ahead. The time was approaching noon. It was incredibly hot and they had no water. As soon as they entered the forest, they felt lighter and cheerful. "Listen, let's go and drink water at the spring because it's still a long way to go. The heat is terrible," Marina suggested. "Do you remember how to go there? The spring is very near, do you hear?" All 3 of them were silent, listening. Indeed, the water was gurgling somewhere very close by. In 5 minutes they came to the spring. The spring flowed from under the ground. The water was ice cold and delicious. The girls drank, washed their faces and sat down to rest. Suddenly it became dark, the sky was covered with clouds, and a strong wind was rising. "Girls, let's run, now it's pouring." Marina picked up her sandals and ran barefoot between the trees. "Yes, my grandmother always says, when it's so hot there's bound to be a terrible thunderstorm," Vera said on the run. "We won't make it home in time. And where to? Are we going to stay here?" The first heavy drop fell to the ground, followed by a stream of icy water. The girls were soaked instantly. The downpour and the wind made it almost impossible to walk. The water covered their eyes, and the wind knocked them off their feet. But what was worse was that the strong gusts of wind were tearing the trees from their roots, which was dangerous. Suddenly Ira took a sharp turn off the path and almost ran towards a house standing on the outskirts of the neighborhood. Everyone immediately realized where she was going. Aunt Zoya lived on the farm, a woman who was not old, but not herself. It was said that she had a husband and a son. They lived in isolation on the farm, did not communicate with anyone. Nobody really knew what had happened to Zoya's mind. The local gossips only gossiped. Her husband Fyodor had disappeared. It seemed that he had gone hunting and disappeared. There was talk of her son, who had gone to town and would not go to his mother. Zoya, though she had her quirks, but she was calm, not violent. She served herself. The houses and buildings looked abandoned and dreary, bringing sadness. The road had been washed away by heavy torrents of water, and the girls nearly fell as they made their way to the house. At first glance, the house looked uninhabited and eerie. Marina went up on the porch and knocked loudly. No one opened the door and the girl pushed the door, which turned out to be unlocked. "Mistress, is anyone home?" Marina called loudly. She went first. No one answered. "We'll stay here, wait out the storm." "Yeah, we'll explain. To be honest, I don't think anyone's been here for days," said Ira, examining the makeshift shelves of books. "What books? I've never seen such books. It's not proper to rummage through other people's things," said Vera. "Oh, come on, there's no one here anyway." At that moment, somewhere in the back of the house, something fell with a clang, and the girls were silent at once. They crept into that room, and except for the open window, they found no one. A strong gust of wind had caused the casement to swing open, hit the wall and shattered. They settled in the kitchen at the table by the window, behind which the elements only raged more violently. In the kitchen was a hatch to a cellar, hidden under a doormat. Everyone in the village had such cellars, usually for storing food supplies. Knock, 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 knock. It was as if someone was knocking on the ceiling in the cellar, which was the kitchen floor. The girls froze fearfully, looking at each other. The sound repeated, only louder. Marina stood up, pulled down the doormat with a jerk, and opened the hatch. Yuck! The girl wrinkled her nose. Vera and Ira approached her. There was a sturdy ladder leading down. Ira went first, followed by Marina, and Vera went last. Marina ran into her friend in the dark because she stopped and looked at something. "Oh, Mom!" Marina almost howled. "We have to get out of here. Have you seen the weather?" suddenly said Vera, looking at the same place where her friends. "We'll be killed by lightning, if not by a tree. Let it settle down a bit, or we won't make it." "Vera, are you out of your mind?" "I'm not staying here," Ira screamed. "Are you scared or what? As if it's the first time you've seen a dead man." "Hanged. For the first time," replied Marina. "Well, what to argue, let's get out of here. I do not understand just what knocked." You only interested in that?" All became uncomfortable, and although they had faced death from early years, they had never seen it so close. It was getting dark outside the window, the wind was howling in the chimney, and the girls were getting sad. They would have to spend the night in this house. But no, a beast stepped toward them out of the darkness. No, it was a man, though it was hard to believe. They screamed in fear, only their scream was overridden by the rumble of thunder outside. The monster took a step, a roll of thunder, lightning, and a deafening silence. There was an eternal horror in its eyes. Vera was shaving, looking straight ahead, not paying attention to the rain, water running down her body. The girl was almost completely undressed, badly mutilated. A blank stare spoke of a terrible tragedy. She had been found on the highway. How she had gotten there remained a mystery. She herself said nothing. Vera did not react to anyone. It was as if she was frozen in a terrible silence. The doctors used clever terms, but it was of no use. The girl did not say anything. She did not even respond to her name. After a long treatment, Vera did not return to the village and tried to forget about everything. And she succeeded. She got a profession, married a city dweller, and very rarely appeared in the village. Until Glafira was born, Vera did not stay with her mother for long. Over the years, the fear seemed to let go. The woman learned to drive the terrible memories into the farthest corner of memory and keep silent. No one would believe her anyway. Marina's body was found in the far room as if a butcher had gutted her. Ira was found in the kitchen on the floor, and in that subfloor they found the owner of the farm. She had put her hands on herself and hung for days. There were no more in the house at that time. About the terrible story tried to forget and not to remember in the village. The killer was not found or did not want to look for because in our country there are no maniacs. No, they were looking for him, but nothing and no one was found. That's the story, daughter, Vera said sorrowfully. Sometimes I close my eyes and I see that house again, the cellar and the feet that don't reach the floor. I look up and there she is, smiling. So I have nightmares too. Glafira hugged her mother silently, thinking about the horror she had experienced. Mom, but you suspected someone when your memory came back, didn't you? Yes, I always thought it was that woman's husband. Whoever he was, the beast had returned to our land. You're right, said the girl thoughtfully. I think Mashka was an aperitif. Ugh, you know, Mom, I think that the knocking you heard then was a warning. You were warned to run, but you didn't understand. Well, maybe. Vera hugged her daughter with a sigh. Your father doesn't know about this story, and hopefully he won't. You know your grandmother, God forbid she finds out about the hospital. Nima's like a fish. The rest of the day flew by unnoticed in troubles and cares at home. Vera sometimes stopped and looked thoughtfully at one point, remembering. She, like her daughter, wanted to see the face of the beast. After supper, Vera and her mother settled down on the veranda talking. Glasha said that she was very tired and went to bed, closing the doors. The girl knew that neither her mother nor her grandmother would climb into her bedroom, so she quite calmly made a doll out of pillows, covered it with a blanket, and climbed out the window. In 10 minutes, Glasha was on her way to the old farmhouse. She didn't know what she wanted to find there, but she was sure that all the answers were there. At the approach to the house, the girl noticed a light in the window, which was flickering in the darkness. as if someone was moving around the room. I wonder who else is so curious. Glasha crept to the window and stood on tiptoe to get a better look at what was happening. Suddenly, she recoiled in fright, not believing her eyes. While she was recovering from her astonishment, the light went out. She had been spotted. "Hello, beautiful," someone hissed in her ear, twisting her arm painfully. "It's not nice to peek. You know that, don't you? Stealing is bad too," she blurted out. "Who's stealing? I'm at home. What's there to steal? Yellowed papers or grandmother's crystal glasses?" "Don't be ridiculous." Yegor laughed unpleasantly. He dragged Glasha with him, even though she resisted. "Come with me." Curious Varvara, that is Glasha, had her nose torn off at the market. "Now we'll do it. We'll tear off her nose. Want some?" Glasha, frightened beyond measure, screamed so loudly that her ears ached. The man gave her a short punch in the neck area and the girl collapsed. "But you can yell. No one will hear you here anyway." He was busy tying the girl's hands and feet. Glasha came to her senses and whimpered softly in fear. There he was in front of her, the beast. It was Igor, the assistant to the district police officer, the same one who had helped them, the same one who had seen Glasha off a couple of times, Glasha from the dance before all the events. She even liked Igor, a lot of people liked him. And now, when Glasha was lying on the dirty floor of the house where Yegor spent his childhood, the picture connected. For a second it seemed to her that she had always known the answer. She was reminded of her mother's words when Yegor had visited them recently. "He looks a lot like someone. It's like I know him and at the same time I don't. Maybe I knew his parents, I should ask, I'm just curious." A familiar face, of course, because her mother had seen his dad's face back then, and maybe Igor himself had been there as a child. He could see everything. That's a familiar face. He lifted the girl up and put her on a chair. "You'll soon keep your girlfriend company on the other side of the world, and as a new place of residence. There's already one lying there, so it won't be boring. You're a fucking psycho. You need therapy. There's no need to be insulting. You don't have much time. Make the most of it," he advised and left. Glasha lay on the floor, cursing herself for her stupidity and begging for help. Suddenly the front door swung open with a crash, almost flying off its hinges. A policeman and a couple of men burst into the house, followed by Vera. "Mommy!" Glafira roared. Vera helped her daughter to free herself, hugged her, trying to comfort her. Yegor was dragged out of the house and taken to the city. It turned out that Vera just wanted to check on her daughter, and found the pillows. She instantly realized where her Glasha had gone, and as she was in a robe, ran to the district police officer. He, having listened to Vera's confused story, took with him a couple of familiar men, went to the farm. Much later, when Glasha and Vera came to the village one day for a visit, the district police officer came to them and told them some details. Father Fyodor and son Igor, two beasts. The father had been dealing for a long time, and not only in the district. In principle, he tried not to shit in the neighborhood, remembering the proverb. Once he couldn't help himself when he saw young and beautiful girls whose life was booming. That was the first time he miscalculated, and one survived. What prevented them from killing the girl, strangely enough, was the mother and wife of the perverts, Zoya. The woman endured years of beatings and abuse, silent and afraid. She was so intimidated that she would never give up her husband. She never told anyone what was happening on the farm, and one day she made up her mind. She found a way out of her situation. That day, the beast cried for the first time. When everything happened, they were looking for the girls. The farm was not searched. Especially they themselves had a grief. The mother of the family died suddenly. According to the head of the family, Zoya did not wake up in the morning. You can see the heart. He himself was allegedly not at home that day. No one came to the funeral, especially because they did not know anyone. The coffin was closed. Vera couldn't say anything at that moment, and then father and son disappeared, went to work and disappeared in the vast expanses of the homeland. And years later in the village appeared a man remotely similar to Fedor named Igor, except that he had a different surname and biography too. Even if someone noticed the resemblance, they didn't pay much attention to it. Igor grew up, was well-read, intelligent, and made a great impression on others. He was on excellent terms with everyone, helped everyone. The man was so trusted that he became for everyone his own, a wolf among the sheep. He noticed Mashka a long time ago but could not get close to her, even though his father taught him not to shit in his nest. Having committed a crime, he went to look for her with everyone, calmed his grandmother. When he realized that Glasha knew something, he decided to get away, but he didn't have time. Vera and her friends came to their house for help and found evil. Igor, although he was small, but he remembered everything and helped his father. By the way, the boy saw his mother dying. He felt sorry for his mother. Even cannibals have mothers. During the investigation, chilling details came to light. Proven episodes were several. Maria was one of many. With Igor's father is no longer asked, he is dead. Himself or his son helped. It is no longer possible to establish. Yegor died before the trial, in the clinic, when he was undergoing an expert examination. In the morning, he was found in bed with a look of wild horror on his face. He managed to escape after all.